Merhaba, kusura bakmayın. Sanırım bir kopukluk oldu. I'm sorry about we have a connection problem. Okay, Marcus is getting back.
Yeah, somehow we got disconnected.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened.
I don't know. Well, anyway, we're here. Here we are. So I don't know what you heard. I don't know what the last thing you heard was.
Yeah, you were talking about this
Epimetheus.
mythology, Epimetheus. Yeah.
Yeah. So Epimetheus waits for something bad to happen and then tries to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our culture in this moment and the epidemic and our response to it and the environment and climate change and all of these things that are going, all these problems we're having are exactly because we have made an Epimethean culture. We have technology, but that isn't the problem. The problem is that we're looking backward. We're waiting for a problem to happen instead of taking advantage of the things that are coming and preparing for them. And so in terms of being creative and answering your question, I think what creativity means is foresight. It means a particular kind of combinatorial foresight. It means a kind of openness, and it means saying yes and then acting toward the future. So it isn't a matter of, well, do I have the hardware, or do I have the internet, or do I have the device? That's technological too. But the real thing is, which way is our culture looking? You know, are we actually anticipating things and acting early to make them better? So, and I think that is a matter of creativity, because creativity isn't just coming up with wild ideas. It's actually thinking forward and being open to strange things, and then still figuring out how to make them useful and beautiful too. That's important. They have to be both.
Yeah, thank you. But like talking about the creativeness, like we can say that the kids, okay, she doesn't know about the technology, or he's creating something, and we can say that, oh, this is very creative. But does it, very about the knowledge of person? How can we describe that creativity? I mean, does it be? Can we say that different ages or different kind of cultures, different kind of knowledges can be different kind of creativity?
I think children are naturally creative, and I think people are naturally creative. But I think educational systems and cultural systems and the way we bring people up, from youth to adulthood and on, effectively scares people or damages people or makes people, kind of become. We probably do it for reasons that we think are good, but I think maybe it's like because we transmit to our children our fears rather than our hopes. We transmit the things that scared us rather than the things that delighted us. We become, I think we become intolerant. But if we know that, because it's really easy to see, then you can say, well, we won't do that. Like I'm going to be, the serious professor who knows a million things, and I'm still going to be silly, and I'm going to be able to know that, okay, now I'm proposing something crazy, which can't be done, but I'm going to keep on working on it, because I can tell that it's crazy. But if I keep on going with this crazy idea, maybe 10 steps down, maybe 20 steps down, it won't be crazy anymore. But if I don't push through that part, I'll never get to the fresh idea.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But what about the rules? I mean, if we have more rules that's tricking us, I mean, does it affect our creativity? Because
that's a really hard thing to explain. But children know it. Like children know how to play. Like if you give children a ball, well, they'll kick it and they'll do something, and then 5 minutes later they will have decided on some rules, and then they'll actually play even more. But the answer, so half of the answer is what do children do? The other half actually is thermodynamics. It's actually like what is the opposite of entropy? Because entropy is actually maximal freedom. Everything can be everywhere.
Yeah.
So freedom is actually our enemy. Like if you magically, shook a wand my way and you made all my molecules free, that would mean I would be decomposing, literally. It would mean that my molecules would just become the earth. They would become free. So the fact that I'm alive and can speak to you is actually because my molecules are not free.
Yeah.
And And the problem with the virus is that it's trying to set them free.
Uh-huh.
You know, well, if you understand that deeply, you understand that everything important, meaning, beauty, culture, history, science, everything is actually a very strategic reduction in freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I tell my students, like, the obvious thing, it's not a new idea, but it's new to them. You know, I ask them, well, what does it mean to walk? And, you know, you know, like everybody thinks they know. Well, in fact, walking is falling. You're stable and you make yourself unstable and you start to fall and you catch yourself, and you make unstable and you catch yourself, and that's how you walk. And so you have the freedom to fall and you block it, and you have the freedom to fall and you block it.
Yeah.
Everything is like that. You set up a rule and you follow it. You set up a rule and you follow it. And you don't say that the rule is your enemy, because, well, if you didn't have the rule, you'd fall on your face. But you just go back and forth. And you also were asking about liquid architectures, which is actually very much about this. Liquid architectures means that in everything important, there are two sides. One side, which is the skeleton, the hard part, and one side, which is the flesh, the soft part. And it applies to physics, it applies to mathematics, it applies to architecture and music and everything you want. There will be these two parts, the fixed and the variable, and they'll be talking to one another. And so you just learn to see it that way, to kind of negotiate constantly between the two. It also means that, like, it came from architecture, it came from when I was studying physics. And we were learning about light being both wave and particle. Which seemed to be like, okay, wave is variable, liquid, and particle is fixed. And I'm in architecture, and so architecture is fixed. And there's this thing in physics about it being variable. And I was learning how to program. And when you program, you quickly understand that the point is to write a program, and then every time you would use a constant, like if you said 2 + 2 is 4, in a program you would say x + y is z. You know, you would take all the constants and make them variable. Well, variable means liquid, because that's what liquids do. Okay. But the operation is architecture, right? That's the hard part. And so, but when you put it together with architecture and music or anything, or liquids literally, you see that they're opposites. And you say, well, I'm in a time that's telling me that opposites actually are connected. Waves and particles, you know, they're light is both. It's not one or the other, it's both. Well, what if I did that with architecture, liquid architecture? What if I did it with music? Music is about time. What if I make it about space? And now you have navigable music. What about dance? Dance is about the body. Can I imagine disembodied dance? Well, yes, I can. You know, and so I can get robots to dance. I can get avatars to dance. I can get people in LA to dance, to make bodies dance in Istanbul. Like all the things that seem to be contradictory are actually reconcilable, and the reconciliations are exactly those of our own time. I mean, they begin collectively to present a worldview that is rich and amazing if we embrace it, provided we don't forget the living world, the climate, each other, you know, pandemics, you know, like it's great to imagine as long as you don't forget.
You're right. So what about like this liquid architectural term? I mean, can it be applied to the practice in architecture? You know, actually. Of
course. Well, of course. And I think all the best architects of all time have been practicing it. You know, like that's what it really means. In every field.
Give an example, like to make it concrete.
Pick an example. You know, like it could be modern, it could be historical. You know, if I start in history, a classical temple, the whole structure of a classical temple. Hagia Sophia too. Yeah. Well, even before that, we can get to Hagia Sophia. The whole structure of a classical temple is regulated by the radius of a column. If you change the radius of the column, then the height of the column changes and the style changes and the whole thing changes. So even though they made it out of marble, conceptually it was variable. You know, it could just modify, and they were smart enough to do that and then still make it out of marble.
Mm-hmm.
Now we call it parametric. We do it in Grasshopper. We do it with software, but it's the same idea that there's this flexibility and this structure. With the Hagia Sophia and all the Byzantine and then the Islamic architecture. In the Islamic architecture, you see it in what the meaning of the ornament is. The meaning of the ornament, because in Islamic architecture you can't have anthropomorphic ornament. You can't have, it's all abstract.
That's
but
right.
why is it abstract? Well, it's abstract because it's trying to tell people without words, to tell them that reality is mathematical, is this complex pattern. You shouldn't try to understand all of reality as if it looked like human beings and to anthropomorphize it. And well, mathematical is liquid also. Mathematical is all variable. So you get, millions of different fantastic symmetrical patterns, which is what you find in Islamic architecture.
Yeah.
In the Hagia Sophia, one of the most famous things about it, apart from its vastness and its sound and all of those things that it had, is the ring of windows all around, which are made, and there are many details that do the same thing, but they're made specifically to make all of that massive dome appear to be floating. Which when this thing was built, it was a just insane idea. Like, we can sort of make something floating because we have steel and we know structures, but to decide to make a stone building where something that size is supposed to give you a sense that it's floating, that's a reconciliation of opposites.
Yeah, but that it was rebuilt by Mimarlığın. It was fallen down.
Well, things fall down.
Yeah.
If we care for them, we build them. We build them again.
Yeah. But in this liquid architecture term, can you include let's say Hagia Sophia? The smell or the feelings that it's takes you in. This can we include those feelings too to the architecture?
Of course.
Yeah,
of course. Well, of course, especially with temples and things like that, you have rituals, and the rituals have sound and smell and feeling. In those big spaces, you have acoustics that are very important, and the acoustics actually tie directly into the music and what kind of music can be composed if it's going to take this much time for the reverberation to come back. So that the same music, if you play it in a normal space, just doesn't sound right because it was composed specifically for the length of time it takes for the impulse and the response to happen. Yeah,
you're right. We're very important topics that you're touching, but I would like to ask you actually more on like interdisciplinary fields, actually, like
in terms of what?
Yeah, interdisciplinary fields. Like, what can architecture be cooperate with in the future? Like, okay, you're working on music, music and architecture and technology, and within this technology and all these developments, like, what are the fields that it will be touching? We know that AI technologies are coming very fast. Do you think they will be having an important role in architectural fields as well?
Yeah, right now, there's a lot of interest in machine learning and artificial intelligence and GANs and cycle GANs and style transfer and latent spaces and just a whole new apparatus, which is really interesting. But if you've been looking at these things and thinking about them for a long time, you realize that every few years there's going to be a new shipment of terms, and people will try very quickly to absorb it so that they can be cool and current and cutting edge, and then there's going to be something new, and then they'll follow that. So on the one hand, it's really important. It's a human breakthrough to make some of these things happen. It's going to be profound. On the other hand, it can also be approached superficially, and that can be problematic. So I've always been optimistic about technology. I've always thought that we should go forward, but for some reason it was never a dichotomy. Like, I never thought that if I go far forward I should forget. That was the mistake that modernity made, and modernism in particular made, that they thought that, okay, we're modern now, that's fine. Let's forget the past. That's not fine. That's how you make mistakes. So we spent 100 years, literally since 1919. The Treaty of Versailles is in my mind where the world broke. You know, like we
when did
in 1919 after World War One.
Yeah.
World War One was bad, but at the end of World War One in Versailles, the winners decided what to do, and that was taken over economically. It was taken off by a form of capitalism that eventually became neoliberal capitalism, which is what's making us suffer right now. But it becomes institutionalized. It has begun before 1919, but in 1919 it takes over because it won the war, so it takes over, and it effectively decides to break the world, like everything. And of course, there are many people who have suffered who think that, okay, now they're going to be liberated from their oppressors. So they're happy that the world is breaking. But you go down and we break music and we break architecture, we break literature, and we break the idea of health and the idea of sanity and the idea of balance. And like all these ideas become like what we want to attack. And for a while, it's refreshing. And for a while it's creative, you know, because well, but 100 years later everything's broken. Like, so we can't do that again. We have to move forward, but we also have to sort of look behind and be a little bit more balanced about it. And so the reason I'm saying that is because we're using artificial intelligence, but in a bizarre way. We're so busy training it that we're forgetting to train our own children. So there's a, you know, there are examples of studies that are trying to teach AI to draw.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so they go around people and they get people to do it. And finally, finally the computer is learning to draw, but I can go into a classroom and ask the students to draw and they don't draw. Right? And I could go on, like all sorts of things that the computer is learning to do that people are forgetting to do. So the analogy to me is a little bit like this. I find it rather funny. You know, it's like, okay, I have I have a computer, or it's an AI, it's a robot, it's my companion, it does everything for me. So one day I decide to go to the gym, you know, to exercise. And since I have my AI and it does everything for me, I ask the AI to lift the weights. What just happened? Like the AI may or may not be getting stronger, but I'm not going to get stronger. The only way I actually get stronger is if I face the problem.
Yes.
So if I give the problem to the AI, great for the AI, terrible for me.
Yeah.
Right? Because now I'm becoming weaker as the AI is becoming stronger.
You're right. So what is like this kind of your ideas? How do they affect your educational perspective? I mean, what do you do, and how is your educational life going? How is your program?
You ask great questions. I have to say they're really perfect questions. So you've heard of something called STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. And then, of course, when that happened, the artists were complaining, well, what about us? And so they put A in there, and it became STEAM, science, technology, engineering. But then I was looking at this and thinking, well, that's still not quite correct. What about the humanities? Because one of the things that died in 1919, or was what began dying in 1919, was the understanding that the humanities actually humanize us. You know, they actually, that the problem of how we become civilized is not easy or a given. We have to make the effort, just like in thermodynamics. You have to insert energy and information to fight entropy, right? So you have to do these things. So anyway, I decided to rethink it and put the H back in, and I started playing around with the letters, and I came out with what I think is the thing after STEM and STEAM, a kind of pedagogical and research and practice model. And it's simple enough that I can explain it quickly. Instead of just being a list of names, I decided that what was really necessary was to have a model, like a scientist would have a model, like some sort of functioning apparatus.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, and it was fortuitous, it just worked out.
Mm-hmm.
So I made an axis. From liquid architectures, there was this idea of a continuum between opposites. So I decided I was going to make an axis of technologies and humanities,
Mm-hmm.
meaning tools and purposes, right? Like utility and values, like what do we care for and what can we do? That was one axis.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another axis perpendicular to that, which was engineering and mathematics. Engineering is when we solve problems concretely, like, but mathematics is when we take a problem and we make it more general, and then again more general, and then again more general. And so that was another continuum. And the third one, of course, was synthetic work like art, and analytical work like science. Okay, so you have these three axes. It's called themas, THEMAS, and in the middle of it is the real key, which is making, which is design, which is art, which is architecture, which are the muses, you know, everything beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's what we're using as a model, you know, which I can go on forever if I, you don't want me to go on forever.
No,
but basically, but it's a really fantastically
Yeah,
useful. It's a fantastically useful model, and yeah, I mean, I've been invited like literally all over the world. I think now it's going to be Zoom all over the world, but I've been on many airplanes talking about it in many places in the world, and it's getting well received. So it's exciting.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So I would like to ask you some questions as well. There are some questions coming from our listeners.
Oh yeah.
Well, one of them is Friedrich Schumacher have insisted in the separation between art and architecture. Do you feel this separation?
The separation between art and architecture?
Yeah. What do you think?
I think that was always there when even when I was a student, that was a topic of discussion. I think people more or less choose. To me, architecture is an art. It always has been an art. And architecture is also a discipline. It's not a job. It's a discipline, like art is a discipline. You know, I mean, you can do art to sell art and to feed yourself, but really it's like something that you are. And architecture is like that. So, but historically, again, there was a division when architecture became a profession, and then architecture became more or less like a service. And so there are people who call themselves architects who are there to design your bathroom, and they don't really care about architecture. And there are other people who care about architecture the way composers care about music. You know, they care about the expression of human culture that is expressed in the things that we build and the way that we build them. So I belong to that kind. I care deeply about architecture and not at all about whether or not this person needs a bathroom or needs more tile for their kitchen, or they saw something that they liked on a trip and they want someone to draw it up so that they could build it. That's important too, but it's not the heart of the matter. Yeah, I'll let you ask a question. My brain's running off.
I love art. I mean, I love ornament too. Okay.
Yeah, ornament.
You know, have everything so minimal. You know, that's not my style. You know, I like this old, you know, architecture and ornaments as well. So I'm with, you know, art and architecture.
But it's interesting to think why it's important. Like why is architecture important, or why is ornament important, or why is beauty important? Right?
I don't know. I feel really. It's a pleasure, you know, to see them. I don't know.
Yeah, it does. But there's something even bigger than that. Let me try to explain it this way. Yeah. When you're an architecture student, inevitably, you know, in the beginning, you want to design your own house. You know, or a house for your family or your friend or something, and then you want to design something a little bit bigger and something a little bit bigger, and so you design, even if you design a skyscraper. But then, you know, as you think about it, your idea of what you're designing is getting bigger, because once you design a building, you realize that, well, it's a building with other buildings next to it. It's in a neighborhood, or it's a tall building in a city, and you realize that, well, yes, you're designing this thing. But you're also designing the context of this thing. Yeah. So I'm designing a building, but I'm actually affecting the neighborhood. I'm designing a building in a city, but I'm actually changing the city. Some steps later, you realize that what you're actually doing is not designing a building at all. What you're designing are the citizens of your city. Basically, by designing this building, especially when buildings lasted as long as the Hagia Sophia or as long as historical buildings lasted, what they were messages from the past to the future. The people who built them said, this is what we think it means to be civilized. Here is a lesson for you to grow up in. When we destroy architecture and when we make architecture only for rent, you know, like how much rent can I collect? What we teach the children is that all that matters is rent. We don't teach them that it matters to respect beauty, to be kind to one another, to be careful, to be balanced, to value proportion, you know, to value those things. We don't teach them, or we teach them when they get to college and it's too late because they needed to understand it when they were 3. They needed to just grow up in it.
Yeah, that's a very good point, I guess. But that's what we should be teaching students. I mean, that's the, you know, architecture is a place where you grow up in. Well, I think it's a nice quote. Yeah. Thank you.
So now we have an opportunity. Now we have an opportunity to do that in cyberspace. You know, because we're trying to do it in computer games and in the media that we have. But it felt different from our lives, and now we're being forced to see that. So this is an interface. It's a practical interface. Is it a beautiful interface? At least it's not negative, right? It's fine. In time, we will learn how to make it civilize us.
Yeah, good. Well, actually, let me talk about my, you know. Well, I like archaeology as well, and I have many works in archaeology, and I found that with archaeology, we have this communication problem. You know, people do not understand what it is, right? They see the ruins and they said, okay, what about it? So because they don't know about the history, most of all, so they don't understand, so they cannot give any meaning to it, so they harm them, right? So I found this really interesting to, you know, visualize this kind of a bit, there can be some VR or AR technologies. I think they are very helpful for people to understand, like, what was it before and how does it, you know, how was life within it? So I found this cyber technology that sounds very useful.
Do you have, well, you should send me links. I'd like to visit.
I'm working on it. Well, we have some sites. I'm working in some archaeological sites in Turkey, Alaya. So we have just started some works. So I hope, it turns out to be good. Also, I would like to ask you about this trans architecture term. Like, what do you mean about that? Like, how do you come up with this term?
Well, it's there's trans architecture, there's transvergence, there's eventually transmodernity. Trans means through, and it really is the prefix that we use when we're talking about transformation, translation, basically about how things change, how one thing becomes another. And one sort of organizing idea in all of this is, how does anything become? You know, how do you, because an architect, an artist, a scientist, a poet, everyone who puts something in the world starts with something that is unformed or is nothing and transforms it into something. And so the magic is in the ability to look at clay and see sculpture, see something, you know, like that. How do you transform this from nothing to something? Well, in nature, when Darwin wrote about evolution, he wrote about the origin of species. He didn't write about the fitness of species. He wrote about the origin of species, which is, he was wondering, how do we get diversity in the world? Industrial civilization preferred to focus on fitness, because then, you know, I could sell you soap and tomorrow I could sell you better soap. Right? So there is fitness in the real world, and we need to make things better that way. But the question of how do we make the world richer is a different question. And that's a question of speciation. How do we make new species